Yes, hi there, Victor Pross speaking. To you, anarchist artist, okay, in this video, which is directed to my fellow anarchists. Oh, my dear fellow anarchists, this video is directed to you. And in this video, The Mind of a Statist, I will delve into examining the philosophical premises that move and animate the statist mentality, this most peculiar creature. But before we tackle the issue of status, and by extension statism, in any detail, we must first begin with a definition of statism. And what is statism? I turn to Wiki. In political science, statism is the belief that the state should control either economic or social policy, or both, to some degree. Statism is effectively the opposite of anarchism. An individual who supports the existence of the state is a statist. Statism can take many forms, from minarchism to totalitarianism. Minarchists prefer a minimal or night watchman state to protect people from aggression, theft, breach of contract, and fraud, with military, police, and courts. Unquote. Ayn Rand's definition of a statist is very instructive here. I gave a definition of statism, but listen to Rand's definition of a statist. I quote, "A statist is a man who believes that some men have the right to force, coerce, enslave, rob, and murder others. To be put into practice, this belief has to be implemented by the political doctrine that the government, the state, has the right to initiate the use of physical force against its citizens. How often force is to be used, against whom, to what extent, for what purpose, and for whose benefit are irrelevant questions." Unquote. Yeah, so minarchists like to think that they can escape the statist label, given that they prefer a minimal or night watchman state to protect people from aggression, theft, breach of contract, and fraud, with military, police, and courts, as opposed to an out-and-out dictatorship. But given the simple fact that no government has ever established or maintained itself by any means other than coercive taxation, the designation of statist still applies. Now, the anarchist is ever want to declare that the state is a gang of violent thugs and nothing else, spoken loudly and often in all of its glorious simplification. The state is a gang of violent thugs and nothing else. Really? Really, that's all it is, just a gang of violent thugs. So, why should thinkers devote an entire discipline known as political science and political philosophy to the state and related matters? You know, how is it that the state, if it's merely just a gang of thugs, how is it worthy of such intense and rigorous intellectual scrutiny? Certainly, given the enormous influence of governments, past and present, all throughout history, it's understandable that philosophically inclined individuals would want to take a look into this ambiguous institution. That is, unless you're a thin libertarian, where it's believed that cogent economic arguments alone will usher in liberty. Yeah, that's it, just the fucking economic arguments. That's what's going to bring about a free society. If we anarchists want to make the full case for liberty and freedom, we want to know what makes the state tick. And by extension, we will gain further insight into what makes the statist tick. We need to understand how this institution commands such widespread respect and compliance. That's what we have to do. You know, a rebuttal message sent to me, spoken against my anarchism, offers a clue, and I'll quote this message that was sent to me. "Victor, minarchists accept that government is coercive, yet think some coercion is justified in order to prevent the collapse of civilization. To prevent something far worse from happening, you would coerce someone. Therefore, to prevent civilization from collapsing and collapsing, coercion is justified. See, anarchists believe that anarchy would collapse civilization, so they believe that some coercive action is justified, unquote. See, there's nothing unique about this person. This is the bloody predominant position that most people take, of course. And, you know, everybody knows that the state is a violent, coercive institution. I don't know why anarchists think that they're establishing something new that's unknown to the statist mentality, as if this argument's going to snap them awake, or I mean, and start offering free market arguments and economic arguments. I mean, they don't understand how deeply rooted how deeply brainwashed these people are, for fuck's sakes. Okay, now, if we are to hack at the roots, as it were, I offer a word of advice to my fellow anarchists. If we are going to make the case against the state and establish the case for liberty, we must understand that the state is a normative institution. A normative institution. You have to get that into your fucking brains, people. We cannot dispense with this moral aspect of the state if, that is, we wish to distinguish the state from an association of common criminals. They are not fucking interchangeable. Now, there are two normative features of the state. Number one, the first is the moral claim to use legitimate coercion. Two, the second normative claim of the state is to be the final arbiter in matters involving coercion. Let me repeat that. Two normative features of the state. The first is the moral claim to use legitimate coercion, and the second normative claim of the state is to be the final arbiter in matters involving coercion. This, my dear fellow anarchists, that is the core guts of the state. Both claims invoke a right to compel obedience. To say that a person has a duty to the state and its decrees is merely another way of saying that the state has a right to compel obedience. The state doesn't merely claim to use legitimate force. Rather, it makes the much bolder claim that it alone has the right to determine when force is morally justified and legitimate and when it's not. The claim of a moral monopoly, of an exclusive right to determine when physical force is and is not legitimate, is the foundation of political sovereignty. You can Google political sovereignty and get the whole history on that. The state, as I pointed out, it's a normative institution, and that means that a moral claim, specifically a claim about rights in this case, is implicit in every coercive measure that the state takes. Now, this rights claim requires a justification. How can the right of a state to issue commands and to enforce those commands by coercive means be justified? How can that be justified? Now, the normative aspect of the state, that is the ethical justification bestowed the state by statists and civilians, and legal legitimizing of the state by the powers that be, is the source of its enormous power and the control over the personal and economic lives of millions of people. That's what we have to fucking understand. This is the mental, moral grip that the state has on fucking people. You have to understand that. Now, in part 2, we will continue with this theme in the series known as The Mind of the Statist. Let's continue to hack at the roots. This is Victor Pross signing out for now. Anarchist Artist, Pop Goes the Culture.